and a lot is being made around S&P improving its sovereign debt rating of South Africa also in the last few days, saying those are just some of the positive signs. Revenue, we are told, is on the up, and that's a positive. And also we are being told about some of the challenges that have to do with affordability of electricity, and therefore the conversations around a preferential electricity tariff for the high energy users, such as the Minerals Council, the ANC telling us that they are beginning work to engage with those groups of people. So to try and help with the affordability of electricity, which remains a concern. So a lot coming out, and it actually links nicely to the story that we want to take you to next, and that has to do with the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivering the 2025 medium-term budget policy statement, outlining a cautiously optimistic outlook, as I just said, for the country's public finances. The address highlighted stabilising debt levels, stronger than expected revenue collection, and a fiscal position that many are calling a potential turning point after years of strain. This comes after a turbulent main budget process, you'll remember that, earlier on in the year, which was delayed, contested, and forced into major revisions that rattled confidence. Now, with a more confident tone, the minister argues that fiscal discipline, improved tax compliance, and lower inflation have started to pay off. But behind the optimism, there are still clear concerns, from high rate of unemployment, slow growth, to service delivery pressures, and longer-term risks to revenue. Let's unpack it all. I'm joined by Owen Nkomo, economist, who will take us through all of those issues. Owen, thank you. And it just fortuitously works out that you and I were going to discuss the finance minister's medium-term budget policy statement, but just before that, the ANC's briefing slotted itself nicely in to sort of set up this conversation between you and I. So we are told that from the various measures and matrices that we observe around the state of public finances in the country, we are potentially at a turning point. Are we?
Hello, Mfugasmela. I think we are indeed, based on the numbers that were presented by the minister. The most important thing I think that we need to focus on is that reduction of the inflation targeting rate to 3%, which is actually long overdue in my view, because inflation has come down quite significantly from our historic average of 6% which we actually had as the upside of the range, where the range was between 3 and 6%. It's now going to be anchored at 3% with a 1% allowance either side, which means our good governor in Pretoria and his team, they don't have any more reasons to hold interest rates very high, because the rate, the difference between inflation and the existing repo rate as well as the prime rate is very high. I think they will definitely start to bring down interest rates. We are also seeing an improvement on the budget deficit side, which is starting to shrink and is indicated that it's going to continue to shrink over the next 2 years. We've got a budget surplus projected of about 60-odd billion rands, which is going to 229 billion over the next three odd years, which is very positive as well. And the narrowing of the deficit, as I say, is very important, because we've got very high debt repayment costs of over 400 billion rands of everything that we collect. 420-odd billion rands is going to pay for both the capital and interest that the country has, you know, in its balance sheet, if I can put it like that. Yeah. And importantly, I do think that the conversation around the debt to GDP stabilizing at about 77.6% over the next few years, it's great. But that one is a story for another day, because you've got countries like America and Japan having that number exceeding 100%. But I think we cannot afford to have a number that is overly, that is more close to 100%, because the cost of servicing debts will increase. We would rather have the servicing of interest costs go into, you know, infrastructure building and, you know, taking care of the needs of the citizens of the country.
What in the timing?
8 out of 10.
Yeah. So what in the timing of everything we've just discussed, Owen, makes the time to be conducive for this fixing of the inflation target at 3% as opposed to a band of between 3 and 6%. As you will know, this move, this policy choice is not without its own critics in terms of what its implications are for the state that we're in as an economy.
Well, look, I think it just makes sense based on the historic trend of inflation. Inflation has been closer to the 3 to 4% band for the longest of times now. And I think that we've previously used a 6% upper side of the band, between 3 and 6% being the target there. But now when you're at 3%, you don't have much room. You can't want inflation to go to zero. But I think that 3 is not a bad number to target given the current inflationary environment. And to this, the other thing we need to think about is the fact that the currency has continued to do an amazing job of strengthening against our major currencies. The currency pairs, the US dollar, the pound, the euro, etc. We're trading at better levels now. And I think if we are consistent with the change of the economy, even things like jobs, unemployment, that number, a very important indicator, might start to come down, which is what we need for the country. But definitely, I'm for a lower interest rate band, aligning ourselves with our global competitors across the world. And
then, Owen, there's also this, you touched on it briefly, this budget deficit that you say is now a decreased, is at 4.7% of GDP or thereabouts. But also you make the point about overall debt of the government at 77.9% of GDP. Talk to those figures. When you say the budget deficit is narrowing, is that necessarily a good thing, that we are, in a way, spending less than what we are collecting by way of revenue?
So it essentially means that we are now in a position, we are closer to meeting our budget requirements without necessarily having to borrow.
Yeah.
Because if we're spending 100 rands and the country is bringing 95 rands, we've got a shortfall of about 5 rands. In this case, that shortfall has moved from over 7% to about 4%, which is very positive. It means we're borrowing less to finance our country's economy. And I think that is very, very positive, actually. And the narrowing of the budget deficit is very important, in my view. If you can just see from what happened with the currency, when these numbers were announced, the currency strengthened. It stabilized, sort of 1708. It's lost a bit of ground. But I think that in the medium term to long term, if we're consistent with the policies, we should be able to get the benefit of a better budget deficit.
All right. So much to wade through, so little time. Thank you for making the time on this Saturday afternoon. Owen Nkomo of Inkunzi Investments joining me with that conversation. As I say, there's lots more that we could have discussed, but we do need to move on.